I heard them before I saw them, their voices drifting through the cracked door of my bedroom in the lake house, low and urgent, as if I were already 6 feet under. The afternoon light slanted across the hardwood floor in dusty gold bars, and the smell of lake water and pine drifted in on the breeze. The lake house has to be worth at least $3 million now with the new dock and the extra lot, my oldest son Nathan said, cool and clinical, the way he talks about stock prices. We should list it before the season ends. My daughter Claire's voice followed, sharp with excitement I hadn't heard from her in years, almost breathless. What about Mom's emerald necklace, the one Dad gave her for their 40th? That has to be worth something. And then my youngest, Tyler, always the echo, softer, almost ashamed, but still joining in. I already called an estate liquidator. They can be here next weekend if we move fast. I lay there in the bed I'd shared with my husband for 38 years, heart still fluttering unevenly from the heart attack that had put me here 2 weeks ago, pretending to be asleep while my own children carved me up like a Thanksgiving turkey. The monitors beside me beeped softly, steady and indifferent, the only witnesses to the fact that I was still very much alive. If this story of betrayal has already made your stomach turn, please subscribe to Her Side right now. I have more to tell, and I promise you're going to want to hear how it ends. I kept my breathing slow and even, the way the nurse had taught me when the pain got bad, counting each inhale like it might be my last. My eyes stayed closed, but every word sliced straight through me, hot and sharp, like a blade dragged across old scars. They weren't even whispering anymore. They were standing right outside my door, the floorboards creaking under their weight, making plans the way other families make dinner reservations. "We can store her clothes and personal stuff in the garage," Claire was saying, her voice bright, almost giddy. "Or just donate it. No one's going to want old lady cardigans." Nathan laughed, actually laughed, a short, dry sound that used to be reserved for good quarterly reports. "The furniture's mid-century. That'll bring good money. The lake house itself is the big ticket, though. Once that's gone, we split the accounts 3 ways and we're done." Done. The word hung in the air like smoke, as if 38 years of marriage, 43 years of motherhood, my entire life could be wrapped up with a bow and a for sale sign hammered into the front lawn. I wanted to sit up and scream until my lungs gave out. I wanted to throw the plastic water pitch at the wall and watch it shatter the way my heart was shattering. Instead, I stayed perfectly still, fingers curled into the cool cotton sheet, and listened to my children discuss pricing my life like it was a weekend yard sale. I tasted metal in my mouth, fear mixed with something darker, something that felt dangerously close to hate. The lake house, the place where my husband Mark and I had spent every summer since we were newlyweds, where the screen door still squeaked the same note it had in 1987, where the kids learned to swim off the old wooden dock, shrieking with joy when they finally dog-paddled to the raft, where we held birthday parties under paper lanterns and Christmas mornings in front of the stone fireplace when they were small, where Mark took his last breath on the back porch, hand in mine, watching the sunset bleed orange over the water 6 years ago. They were ready to sell it before my body was even cold. A nurse came in then, her shoes squeaking softly on the hardwood, the faint scent of antiseptic and coffee trailing behind her. She checked my IV, adjusted the oxygen tubing under my nose with gentle fingers, and leaned close enough that I could smell the peppermint on her breath. "Mrs. Harper, your children are still here. Should I tell them you're awake?" I opened one eye just enough to meet hers and gave the tiniest shake of my head, so small I wasn't sure she'd see it. She understood immediately. She had seen this before, too many times. "I'll give you a few more minutes," she whispered, and left the door exactly as it was, the voices of my children drifting in like poison gas. That was the moment the tears finally came, silent and scalding against my temples, soaking into the pillow. That was also the moment I stopped being devastated and started getting angry, a slow, steady burn behind my ribs that felt almost like strength. A pause, then a gasp that cracked something open in my chest. "Catherine, my God, we thought—" "I'm awake," I said, the words tasting like victory and terror hope all at once. "And I need you to stop them." Elena Brooks had been my best friend since we were 18. Before husbands, before children, before life sanded down our edges. We met the first week of college, survived bad boyfriends and worse haircuts together, stood up at each other's weddings in dresses we swore we'd never wear again. When her husband died in a car accident 12 years ago, I was the one who held her while she screamed into my shoulder until she had no voice left. When Mark got sick, she was the one who sat with me through every chemo session, bringing homemade casseroles and holding my hand when the doctor said the words no one wants to hear. 2 years before Mark died, he and I changed the deed on the lake house. We put it in Elena's name, with lifetime rights for us to live here as long as we wanted. Mark wanted to make sure Elena would always have a safe place if she needed it, a sanctuary after everything she'd lost. My children never knew. They were too busy with their own lives, their own portfolios, their own curated Instagram feeds to notice paperwork. Elena arrived the next afternoon in a flurry of jasmine perfume and tears. The screen door slammed behind her the way it always had, and she took one look at me propped up in bed, pale and thin and furious, and burst out crying all over again. "I came as soon as I hung up the phone," she said, clutching my hand so hard my fingers went numb. "Those vultures!" "Not so loud," I whispered, but I was smiling for the first time in weeks, a small, fierce curve that felt foreign on my face. She pulled a thick manila folder from her purse, the edges worn soft from years of handling. "I brought everything: deed, trust documents, the letter from Mark explaining it all in his own handwriting. They can't touch the house. It's been mine since 2019. I closed my eyes and felt the tears come again, but these were different. Relief so sharp it almost hurt. "Thank God," I breathed, and the words tasted like lake air and second chances. That night, Claire came into my room carrying a tray of soup she clearly hadn't made herself, steam curling up in lazy spirals that smelled of canned chicken and false concern. She set it down and gave me the practiced, sad smile she'd been perfecting since the heart attack, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Mom, we've been talking. The doctor says recovery could take months, maybe years. It might be kinder to everyone if we start making some practical decisions now." I let my head loll against the pillow like I was too weak to hold it up, letting my eyelids flutter. "Decisions?" I croaked, each syllable scraping my throat raw. She sat on the edge of the bed, patting my hand like I was a child, her manicured nails catching the lamplight. "The lake house is too much for you to maintain. We found a lovely assisted living facility in the city, closer to all of us. And honestly, Mom, the money from selling this place could pay for the best care. You'd want that, wouldn't you?" Her voice was honey over broken glass, sweet and cutting all at once. I made my eyes wide and confused, letting them fill with tears I didn't have to fake. "Sell the lake house?" "It's just a house, Mom." She squeezed my fingers a little too hard. I let a single tear slip down my cheek, perfect timing, and watched her face flicker with something that might have been guilt. "Mark loved this house," I whispered, and my voice cracked on his name the way it always did. Claire's face softened, just for a second, then hardened again like ice forming over moving water. "Dad would want you taken care of," she said, and stood up quickly, smoothing her blouse as if she could smooth away the moment of weakness. She left thinking she had won the first round. I stared at the ceiling long after the door clicked shut, listening to the loons calling across the water, feeling the old ache of missing Mark bloom fresh in my chest. I wondered if he could see this wherever he was. I wondered if he was as disappointed in them as I was. And then I wondered if I had failed them somehow, if love could curdle into this kind of greed when you weren't looking. The next morning, I asked the nurse for my phone to call a friend. Instead, I texted my granddaughter Ava with shaking fingers. "Come alone. Bring your laptop. Tell no one." Ava showed up an hour later, looking like she hadn't slept in days, her dark hair pulled into a messy knot, eyes red-rimmed. She was 22, home from graduate school for the summer, and the only one who had visited me every single day in the hospital without being reminded, bringing me contraband chocolate and reading aloud from my favorite mysteries until I drifted off. She slipped into my room and shut the door with exaggerated care, the click loud in the quiet house. "Grandma," she whispered, eyes filling again as she took in the tubes and monitors. "They're planning an estate sale. Uncle Nathan already has a realtor coming tomorrow." I gripped her hand with my good one, feeling the warmth of her skin anchor me. "I know, baby. I heard everything. I need your help." She didn't hesitate, didn't even blink. Anything. I told her about Elena, about the deed, about the plan forming in my head like a storm cloud gathering over the lake, dark and electric. My voice shook, not from weakness now, but from the sheer size of what I was asking her to help me do. Ava's eyes went wide, then narrowed with something fierce and protective. "So the house, it's not even yours to sell?" "Legally, it's been Alina's for 6 years," I said, and felt the old grief rise, not for the house, but for the children who never understood why we did it. Your grandfather and I wanted to make sure she was taken care of. Your mother and uncles threw a fit when we paid for your Aunt Sophie's rehab. We knew they'd never understand this. Ava's jaw tightened, the same stubborn set Mark used to get when he was angry. "They're monsters." "They're scared," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Scared of being ordinary, scared of not having enough, scared of me dying and leaving them with nothing but memories." She looked out the window at the lake sparkling in the morning sun, diamonds dancing on the water, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "What do you need me to do?" I said record everything, and my own voice sounded like someone else's, someone stronger. The small turn came 2 days later, sharp and sweet as lemonade on a July afternoon. Nathan had scheduled a walkthrough with a realtor named Paige. I heard them on the deck, voices carrying through the open windows on the warm breeze, the smell of fresh-cut grass and charcoal from someone's grill drifting in. I was supposed to be napping, but I had dragged myself to the sunroom with Ava's help, legs trembling, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. I hid behind the ferns, their fronds brushing my cheeks, and watched. Paige was gushing, heels clicking on the cedar planks. "This property is a dream. 5 bedrooms, private dock, western exposure. We'll list at 3.2 and it'll be under contract in a week." Nathan sounded pleased, almost smug. "We'd like to move fast. My mother's care is going to be expensive." That's when I pressed call on the burner phone Ava had smuggled in, my fingers steady for the first time in weeks. Elena picked up on the first ring. I put her on speaker and held the phone toward the open window, the lake breeze cool against my flushed face. "Actually," Elena's voice rang out clear and strong, slicing through the afternoon like church bells, "you'll find the property isn't available for sale. I'm the legal owner, have been since 2019. Silence, thick and stunned. Then Nathan's sharp intake of breath, almost a gasp. "Who is this?" "Elena Brooks, Catherine's best friend. The one your parents put the lake house in my name to protect it from exactly this kind of situation." I watched through the leaves as Nathan's face went white as the dock paint, his phone slipping in suddenly sweaty hands. Paige started stammering apologies, backing toward her car so fast she nearly tripped in her heels. Claire came running from the kitchen, phone in hand, eyes wide and panicked, mouth opening and closing like a fish. I ended the call and leaned back against the cushions, heart racing but triumphant, the taste of victory sharp and metallic on my tongue. That was the moment they realized the game had changed, but they didn't know I was playing yet. A week later, I was strong enough to sit up without help, though my arms still trembled when I reached for the water glass. The doctor had reduced my meds and said I was a medical miracle. I told him miracles take planning, and he laughed like I was joking. Ava brought me a laptop and we set up a private cloud folder labeled Insurance. Every night, while my children thought I was sleeping, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional cry of a loon, I uploaded recordings, screenshots of texts, photos of documents they thought they'd hidden in drawers. My hands shook, but they didn't stop. Claire tried the gentle approach again one evening, bringing chamomile tea that smelled like childhood summers. She sat on my bed like we were girlfriends, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the way she did when she was nervous. "Mom, we're just trying to do what's best. The lake house is too isolated. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's here? I let my lip tremble, let my eyes fill. This is where your father died. I want to stay near him. She patted my knee, the gesture awkward, like she'd forgotten how to touch me. Dad would want you safe. Safe. That was their favorite word now. Safe meant selling everything I loved and putting me in a place with plastic plants and scheduled activities and the faint smell of disinfectant and despair. Nathan took a different route the next day. He brought in a lawyer, some slick kid in a $5,000 suit who talked to me like I was 5, using small words and a patient smile that made me want to bite him. Mrs. Harper, your children are concerned about undue burden, perhaps a power of attorney. I'm not dead yet, I said clearly, and watched the lawyer blink, watched Nathan's mouth fall open just a fraction. I smiled sweetly, the expression feeling strange on my face after so many weeks of pain. And I won't be signing anything. That night, Tyler tried, my baby boy, always the follower, always trying to keep the peace, sat on the floor beside my bed and cried. Actually cried. Big heaving sobs that shook his shoulders. Mom, we're drowning in debt. The firm laid me off last year. I didn't want to tell you. If we could just sell the lake house. I reached out and touched his cheek, feeling the stubble, the wetness of his tears. I should have told you, I said softly, and meant it. He thought he'd won, thought tears would do what threats hadn't. I let him hold my hand while I memorized the desperation in his eyes, the way his fingers trembled against mine, and felt something inside me harden into steel. The climax came on a Thursday, the air thick with the promise of rain, the lake gray and restless under brooding clouds. They'd scheduled the estate sale for the following weekend. Trucks were coming to empty the house. My children had spent days boxing up Mark's things, my things, our life, the sound of packing tape ripping like screams in the quiet house. I heard them laughing in the garage about how much the kayak would bring, the sound carrying on the wind like mockery. I waited until they were all in the kitchen making dinner, arguing about whether to keep the good china or sell it, the smell of garlic and tomatoes drifting down the hall. Then I walked in. Not shuffled, walked, cane in one hand, folder in the other, legs shaking but holding. 3 faces turned toward me like I was a ghost risen from the lake itself. Evening, I said calmly, the words steady as the dock in winter. We need to talk. Claire recovered first, hand flying to her throat. Mom, you shouldn't be up. Sit down, I said. My voice didn't shake, not once. Nathan opened his mouth, closed it. Tyler looked like he might faint, his face draining of color. I laid the folder on the kitchen island with deliberate care, the papers inside rustling like dry leaves. The deed transfer crisp and official, Mark's letter in his careful, slanted handwriting that still made my throat close. Bank statements showing the accounts they thought they were theirs were actually irrevocable trusts with strings attached, strings they would never have accepted if they'd known. Nathan found his voice, hoarse and ragged. This is fraud. You can't. I can, I said, and the certainty in my own voice surprised even me. And I will be signing anything. No, and I did, with your father, years ago, when we realized what kind of people you were becoming. Tyler started crying again, silent tears this time. Claire looked like she'd been slapped, hand pressed to her mouth. Nathan's face went through 10 shades of red. The lake house belongs to Elena, I continued, each word measured, deliberate. Has for 6 years. The money you've been counting isn't yours unless you earn it. 500 hours of community service each, financial responsibility classes, and a letter of apology to Elena for trying to steal her home. Claire whispered, voice breaking, You planned this. No, I said, and felt the weight of every sleepless night, every recorded betrayal, settle on my shoulders like armor. I hoped I'd never have to use it. I looked at each of them in turn, really looked, seeing the strangers my children had become and the frightened little kids they used to be, all at once. You want to know what your inheritance is? It's the chance to become decent human beings. Take it or leave it. Silence stretched like a held breath, thick enough to choke on. Tyler broke first, voice small. "I'll do it," he whispered. "I'll do the hours." Claire stared at the lake through the window for a long time, the gray water mirroring the storm in her eyes. Then she said, voice barely audible, "I'll do the financial classes. I didn't know how bad it had gotten." Nathan stood rigid, fists clenched. "This is blackmail." "It's consequences," I said, and the word tasted like justice. He stormed out. We heard his car peel out of the driveway, gravel flying. Claire and Tyler stayed. We sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the rain finally coming in sheets against the windows, washing the world clean. They told me things I hadn't known, debts that had piled like snowdrifts, divorces hidden behind closed doors, failures they'd buried under success and pride. I listened. For the first time in years, I listened without judgment, only love and sorrow braided together. Nathan came back 3 days later with coffee and paper cups and an apology that cost him everything to say, voice cracking on the words. He started volunteering at a veterans organization the next month, showing up in jeans instead of suits, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty for the first time in his adult life. 18 months later, the lake house is louder now, filled with new voices, children's laughter bouncing off the water like skipped stones. Elena moved in down the shore after selling her city condo, her garden already blooming wild with black-eyed Susans. Ava finished her master's and runs the literacy program Claire funds with quiet pride. Tyler coaches Little League with the money he used to spend on bottle service, his own kids cheering from the bleachers. Nathan teaches financial literacy to teens and brings his new baby daughter to swim every Sunday, her tiny fingers wrapped around his like forgiveness. They earned it. Every hour, every apology, every changed life. I still walk with a cane some days when the weather turns damp, but most days I don't need it. The lake air working its old magic on my bones. The lake is the same. Sunsets bleeding orange across the water, loons calling at dusk like they've called for 100 years. Mark's presence in every creak of the floorboards and whisper of wind through the pines. Sometimes I sit on the dock and watch my children, my real children, the ones who chose to grow, teaching their own kids to skip stones. And I think about that day I lay in bed listening to them plan my funeral while I was still breathing, heart pounding against the sheets. I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out, I just cleared space for something better. The lake house stands, windows glowing against the dark water, filled with laughter again. Not mine anymore, not legally, but home in every way that matters. If this story touched you, if it made you angry or hopeful or grateful for the people in your life, please leave a comment below and tell me your own story. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories of women who refuse to be counted out, subscribe to Her Side. We're just getting started.